Welcome, everyone. I'm Christina, one half of Christina and Andy. So welcome. I'm going to let Andy actually kick us off, especially because he's the animal expert with his wife, who's a veterinarian, and his quite extensive collection of pets. So he's going to start us off and talk about sort of what we did, the different types of research that we incorporated into this effort, and a little bit of background about pet ownership. And then I'll pop back in a little bit and talk about the insurance piece and some of the pet insurance, advantages and barriers and opportunities. So Andy, I'll let you kick it off here.
Great. Thanks so much, Christina. And thanks everyone for showing up today. This will take probably about 40 minutes. As Brad and Christina mentioned, we'll have time for questions throughout. And towards the end, so we've built that into the presentation. We do a bunch of self-sponsored research. This one made a lot of sense for us, and you'll see as we get into the methodology kind of how it evolved as we got into field and started growing. But pets are a core tenet of who we are as a company. When we did have a physical office, it was not uncommon to see 2 or 3 dogs running around in there as people brought their pets in. So this just made a lot of sense as a topic for us, being that pets are a huge part of who we are, and insurance is one of our key industry focuses. We're not really going to be talking anything too kind of salesy for this presentation. We're just going to be presenting this, but obviously anybody who doesn't know us, we are a complete full service market research firm. We have a few core industry focuses, and we're more than happy to run through a capabilities meeting if anybody would like to learn a little bit more about who we are and what we do from that angle. So with all that being said, let's go ahead and jump right in. So between November 2021 and March 2022, we conducted 3 separate studies. There was an initial online quantitative phase with 500 consumers who were current pet owners. This was nationally sampled. The criteria were that it should be 18 plus. The mean range age was 50. It was completed in early January 2022. And we quickly realized that, this initial piece was more focused on kind of pet ownership, with a smaller section on pet insurance. And as that kind of started to circulate as a topic, we saw that there was a lot of interest in digging in a little bit more on the pet insurance aspect. So we jumped onto an omnibus with 1,500 pet owners, similar kind of setup in terms of the national sample, and 18 plus 45 was our mean age for that one. And that focused on, some really digging into some hypotheses that came out of that first one with the focus particularly on pet insurance. And then we realized that we wanted more. So we went ahead and kind of did a couple of qualitative interviews to get more context and flavor on some of these topics. We did 10 interviews, 5 with pet insurance owners and 5 with pet owners who do not have pet insurance. They were 45 minutes and 30 minutes respectively. So we paid a little bit more time to the pet insurance owners just because there was more to dig into there. That was kind of nationally sampled. And that was completed in March 2022. As it comes to this presentation, occasionally we'll call out, where it makes sense, what methodology was what, but we really tried to synthesize this to tell a complete story, kind of bringing all 3 of those aspects together. One quick trigger warning on what we have up here. There are going to be a ton of gratuitous, adorable puppy and kitten pictures throughout the presentation. So just if that's not your thing, we apologize, but we are not beyond pandering for your attention with cute animal pictures. So just to let you know that. So as Christina mentioned, I'll jump in. I'll talk about kind of the overall pet ownership. A lot of this was a focus on, what we did with that first portion, where we kind of dug that out, but there's, a smattering of other methodologies that go in here, as I mentioned. We'll start out, what are the top kind of benefits that we asked folks? What are the benefits, social, emotional health of owning a pet? This quote at the top here really kind of encompasses things. A home without a pet is an empty home. The top markers we saw here were unconditional love, helping to lower stress, providing an outlet for affection, and the fact that they make you laugh. They're a big part of your life. They add that kind of enrichment, that enjoyment. They're just part of the family. I thought this is a really good quote and a fun one that came out here from the Qualitative. This is a kid's show, so we'll say she does some weird stuff. It's entertaining to watch. I love playing with her. It's funny because she's the most spoiled, fat, lazy cat, and suddenly I'll wave a wand around and she's like, I'm a predator. I'm a hunter. Fear me. And she's going after a little catnip jellyfish or whatever. I just find it amusing. She's very affectionate. She'll come and put her head next to my leg and lean on it and purr. It's a different kind of affection, but it's clearly saying that, hey, I'm here. Let's spend time together. And that's just nice. I appreciate it. So one really interesting aspect of what we talked about here was of the folks that we talked to, almost a quarter had welcomed a new pet into their home during the pandemic. We have some reasons for why this happened, but I think it's not uncommon. I know our household did as well, and a lot of folks that I've kind of anecdotally in my life have done the same thing. But there's a whole smattering of new pet owners that have come out in the past few years. Not surprisingly, a lot of those were not new pet owners. They were adding a pet, so they from multi-pet households were even more likely to do so. But when we asked, what are the words that would describe, how their new pets made them feel, and among folks who have welcomed a new pet during the pandemic, they were almost universally positive. Were the descriptors that they had: happy, thankful, grateful, excited, wonderful, all kind of bubbled up to the top there. So here's a couple of quick quotes, when we're talking about kind of the reasons why, probably not surprising. Working from home gave me that flexibility to get a puppy, and the second quote just kind of talks to, there's a lot of different things that are going on in people's lives, especially bringing a puppy in that, can take a lot of time in terms of training and kind of, the attention and affection that they need. So just being there and being around was helpful. And, some other things that we heard, the kids really just wanted to have something around. They weren't at school as much. So, they needed that distraction. They needed that outlet for their attention. So pets were really a good way of doing that. Pets, are not all fun and games. Having 5 cats and 2 dogs, there are a lot of things that kind of drag at your attention in ways that aren't always 100% positive. Costs were some of the biggest ones that came up. Worrying about their well-being and kind of practical responsibilities were some of the biggest ones that we heard going on throughout this research, and they were key themes. In terms of costs, their food, veterinary expenses, grooming, dog walkers, things like that. Just worrying about their healthcare, their quality of life, making sure that you're doing right by them as pet owners. Practical responsibilities, traveling and having to worry about them, cleaning up after them, taking care of litter boxes, taking them out for walks, those sort of things. Training, especially as we talked about with the newer pet owners. Yes, puppies, kittens, they require a lot of time and they're pretty hands-on. So that came out quite a bit. And, other frustrations, behavioral issues that some folks ran into, bathroom accidents, things like that came up kind of thematically as well. So, more on, cost was one of the biggest issues when it comes to pet ownership. Pet owners know that, this is a major challenge. However, it was really something interesting that we kind of uncovered throughout this research was their knowledge of, what they thought their self-reported annual cost, all-in cost of owning a pet would be. This is among single pet owners to kind of keep things steady here, but we'll see that the self-report from our data was $468 of the all-in annual cost. When we look to secondary data from the ASPCA, we can see that that number is greatly off of what those actual costs are, leaving a pretty big gap in terms of what people perceive their pets to cost and what it actually takes to have a pet. So just to keep quick takeaway summary of what the section held, pet owners recognize that cost is a major challenge of ownership, but they're underestimating by quite a bit, 50 to 150%. The actual cost is that much higher than what they perceive it to be. So I'll let Christina take over here now, and we'll talk a little bit about pet insurance as we dive into that topic.
Great, great. Thanks, Andy. So we'll talk a little bit about folks who have pet insurance, and then we'll talk about some of the folks who did not and some of the reasons there. In terms of pet insurance owners, we looked at a little bit of the demographics and some of the quantitative research to, some groups that popped in terms of who's more likely to have pet insurance. So they're more likely to be male, more likely to be younger, under 40, which was interesting. Northeast was a little bit more likely, not surprisingly, higher income, and all the things that go along with that in terms of education and those types of things, employment status, the type of stuff. More often dogs than cats, which I don't think is a surprise. And also people of color more likely to have pet insurance. So sort of just a demographic sort of snapshot. Interestingly, most folks who have pet insurance pretty happy with it. We're going to look at a couple different attitudes toward it. Folks who maybe touch it a little bit more promoters of it, and then folks who are kind of in that set it and forget it, maybe don't touch it as much type of category. But in general, about 3 in 4 are satisfied. They feel like they're getting good value for the money. In terms of why they got it, they want to be covered, right? In case something happens, future issues. We had some who had a prior issue with a pet. The pet had a health issue, concern, and so that motivated them to get insurance for the next pet. And a few who had a pet with a chronic issue. So we have a couple of examples, and this first comment here from a pet insurance owner gets at kind of the moral obligation of pet insurance that we heard as a recurring theme through some of the research. So this person had a dog who died from an illness that they were not able to afford to treat and had to put the pet down. So pet insurance is helpful for something like that. And I think a lot of the folks that get pet insurance, and certainly in the qualitative interviews, told us that they feel an obligation. They don't want something like this to happen where they could potentially be in a position that they would have to lose their pet or make an unthinkable decision because they couldn't afford it. And so someone else said it's also, they think of it like people insurance. If there were a $10,000 expense, maybe I could do it, but I'd rather not. So if I could get pet insurance, that would, at least I'd be protected against a catastrophic issue. So for those who have pet insurance, again, we're going to talk about these two sides, this sort of promoter and the more passive folks, but the ones who sort of touch it, they feel like that pet insurance does have value, especially those who are using their policies. Someone here, thank goodness we got this insurance. We've saved $10,000. It doesn't cover routine care, but it pays for all the issues that the pet has, $120 a month. And here's someone who's really seeing some value. And then this issue that we just saw, the moral obligation. There's this consistent theme that we heard where pet owners feel it's part of their duty. They need to find a way to pay for the pet's care, the way to pay for, not just routine, but also something were to happen, and that it's incumbent on them as pet owners to find a way to do that, and insurance enables them to do that. Your pet's part of the family, like Andy said, and you have that same responsibility that you would have to the people in your family. And then we'll talk about this other side. There are some who get pet insurance kind of as a set it and forget it. They get it to have in place, but they don't really know much about it. They sort of sign up, they enroll, and they don't even know what their monthly premium is exactly or what it covers. They haven't used it. So we do have some folks who are a little bit unclear, even though they may own pet insurance. So we're going to look at those two profiles. So we have kind of personas here. So we're going to meet Jeff, our persona of a pet insurance promoter. So Jeff, very highly satisfied pet insurance owner, has a dog about 7 years old who has some issues, health issues that require some testing, require dietary restrictions. tells everyone that they really should have pet insurance, and feels that it's part of pet ownership. And Jeff, like a lot of insurance buyers we see in other insurance categories, wants no surprises. So having pet insurance, just like having any other kind of insurance, is a set cost, a fixed cost, and cuts down on some of those surprises. So for Jeff, that gives him peace of mind. So here's a little bit about this person. This person happened to have Figo as if I'm saying it right, as their insurance company. Choosing on value, also looked at a couple different companies, but looking for coverage for the cost. This particular person, who was one of respondents, obviously we've changed the name, but this was a real participant in our research, is on the higher end of what the monthly premiums we typically see are. So pays a little bit more. The dog has some issues, but I think that's very interesting because we're talking about someone who pays more than the average, who is still a really huge promoter and feels that he's getting a good value. So when you have someone who is a strong believer, even a higher price point is not a deterrent for them. Does not include preventative, but including diagnostics and services. To him, that's worth it. Looked online, asked friends and family, and also got a discount for having a rescue pet. So again, that wanting that cost control, right? I'm going to pay, in my car insurance, my car payment, I'll get the extended warranty. I'll get whatever it is to give myself that peace of mind. And that's the mentality of these pet insurance promoters. So we have a comment from Jeff. So it's been a godsend. I didn't agree to even adopt this pet until I knew I had a way to get insurance that would cover everything. So again, sort of part of the pet ownership agreement for these people, and wish my human health insurance had these same kinds of features. I'm very satisfied. So then we have our next persona profile is a more passive pet insurance owner. So this is Sarah. So Sarah's moderately satisfied. She has a 2-year-old dog, pretty good health, that she got during the pandemic. So her pandemic puppy, got from a breeder, kind of neutral on pet insurance ownership. She got it because she had a situation where she could not afford to treat a pet and had to put the pet down, did not want that to happen again, and got it kind of for those catastrophes. So she sort of has it in place. She does have a younger dog. So, she has it in place kind of as a just in case. Went with Healthy Paws, a price buyer. So in this case, a more passive person who is just putting this in place for emergencies, much more price focused, just trying to find something inexpensive, pays about $28 a month, doesn't really know all the details, hasn't really touched it or used it too much, and just looking for that catastrophic coverage. Doesn't cover regular visits, doesn't cover the regular medications, heartworm, those types of things. Did sort of limited research, looked on social media, asked a couple of friends, didn't really consider anything else, just kind of very much what we see a lot, especially in the P&C space, is set it and forget it type of person. Would like a little more value. And we'll talk about this value proposition for some of these passive folks. But if some of the regular expenses were covered and they could touch their pet insurance a little bit more, there'd be a little bit more opportunity for connection, where they would feel that we're getting something, and maybe have a little more positive feeling toward it as opposed to neutral. So, I have security, then I have it, it's peace of mind. But then when I look at the money, I'm like, oh, am I wasting my money? It's an individual decision. I wouldn't discourage or encourage anybody. It depends on your financial situation. It might be too big of a monthly expense, but they have it kind of as a safety net. So this little bit of, is this a waste of money, is kind of a recurring theme that we see with the folks who are a little bit more passive, especially if they're not touching it as much as a Jeff type of persona would be touching their insurance. So we asked a little bit about how they got their insurance, and it was largely online. So, really comfortable. Again, we mentioned these folks tend to be a little bit younger. So, online purchase, pretty easy and straightforward. Some met someone in person or, over the phone or some other way, but typically it's an online type of a thing. And then in terms of who they're using, it's fragmented, but we heard things like Pet First, the ASPCA Health Insurance, Healthy Paws, Nationwide Progressive, Pet Plan, and Trupanion were the top ones. And we looked at about 2 or 3, in most cases, except sort of our passive person who kind of just asked somebody and got, one that was, if the price was right, but they'll look online, and like we hear with a lot of products, with PNC products as well, and health insurance, Googling, right? I Googled it, I like to research and Google it, get some names, and then go check out the websites and, maybe look at a couple different companies. So as I mentioned, we sort of have this, touching it, using it, really satisfied. Those not really using it or don't feel like they're getting a lot of value of it have a very hard time articulating the ROI. And that's true across the insurance space. The more you have connection with your insurance carrier, your insurance company, the more loyal you feel. When you're disconnected and this is a product that you can't touch, can't see, there's a little bit more questioning of, do I really need this? So we see that in the barriers. So here's our non-pet insurance owners. So a big chunk of these folks have considered it at some point. They were mostly aware of it. They know it exists. They don't know a ton about it, but they thought about it at least some point, especially the recent pandemic pet acquirers. So, more than half of those have at least thought about pet insurance, but they ultimately opted not to. And the main reasons, which we'll go into in a second, are is cost, which, I don't think is a big surprise, but more so than straight cost, straight, I don't want to pay $28 a month. It's this sense of value. I don't know what I'm getting for $28 or $38 or $50 a month. What does it give me? I don't really get it. So there's that sense of, of value more than straight up expense, or, my pet's healthy. I don't think I really need it. When, if it doesn't cover preventative care and it only covers if something goes wrong, my pet's okay. Or I could self-insure for these things and I could save up and pay for it. So like this person says, I could bank the money and I could take care of those expenses later on. And then familiarity, I heard of it, have a couple of friends who have it maybe, but what does it cover? Don't really get it. And we had some who hadn't thought about it at all. I can afford it. Or, I'm concerned about the out of pocket. And we'll see this, this idea of, is pet insurance, is it really on the up and up, or is it, we say sort of a scammy feeling on the next slide here, but there's a little bit of skepticism about pet insurance and the actual value it gives among the non-owners, and again, a little bit among those passive owners as well. They don't really know, what is it going to cost me and what am I going to get for the cost? So that transparent ROI is really hard for them to see and feel and articulate. So if there were something that could show, here's an average cost of things, here's, that, as Andy pointed out, they have a huge misconception about how much they're spending. They spend things through the year and you ask them and they go, it was $500, but it might've been $1,000. They're just not thinking about it. So if this could be brought to their attention, here's the typical cost of these types of things. And here's what would be covered, and here would be the copay and the co-insurance, those types of things. I think that would, as this person says, that would catch my eye. That would bring it to life a little bit for me. And some concerns, again, what's going to be excluded? Are they going to exclude pre-existing conditions? Is my pet going to be too old to get it? So a lot of sort of a skepticism there. So another comment here about the value prop. My number one thing is being really clear on coverage and exclusions. What's covered, what's not covered. It's people really want to make things simple. Their lives are already complicated. We see this all the time with shopping for insurance. Insurance is complicated, so this adds one more layer on that. If this could be really simple and easy, then they would see a little bit more value. So we also talked to them about pet. This is non-owners. If you were going to buy pet insurance, not channel in terms of online or phone, but more channel, who could guide you to pet insurance? What type of resource? And so, not surprisingly, about half said their vet, if their vet recommended it, or offered it through their office. That's a big influencer. It's an influencer over a lot of the things that they do with their pet. But we had a lot of openness to auto and home insurance and other insurance companies as well. So about a third of folks are saying, hey, if my auto home carrier offered this to me, I could wrap it in with my bill. I would definitely do that. Same thing with other insurance companies that I have a relationship with, my health insurance or other insurance companies. And then also associations. So for professional association or AARP or, an association I have a relationship with were to offer, then I might, consider that. And then some said their employer, which we'll talk about a little bit later. But if it were, nice and easy and the employer could offer it and it comes right out of their check, that certainly is an advantage too. So just to kind of sum up the section here, even our non-owners have at least thought about it, but the value prop's really hazy. The details are kind of complicated. There's a little bit of mistrust, but they do value their vet's recommendation. That could be a potential resource. And we did do a little bit of attitudinal comparison between our pet insurance owners and our non-owners on some items here. What's really interesting is even the owners want a little more education about pet insurance. So again, not everybody is a Jeff, right? They don't all know, that touching it all the time. So they want more information, both owners and non-owners. And at the same time, the same proportion of owners and non-owners said that I think it might be a ripoff, even those who are paying for it. So again, going back to that value prop, that little bit of a scammy feel. Are there going to be exclusions, those types of things? And then the employer opportunity. So if it were optional, my employer, if it were a voluntary benefit that I could just take out through my paycheck, that would make me a lot more satisfied with my employer. So, a third of the non-owners and a lot of the owners said that. And you'll see some of the peace of mind, which we hear about a lot. It'll eventually pay for itself. The owner is more likely to feel that way. And then that moral piece again, right? Every pet owner, responsible owner should have this. So here's some opportunities. So our overall takeaways here, we've got a lot of new pet owners. Cost is a challenge. They know cost is a challenge, but they don't know exactly how much they're really spending. So it's going out the door and they're not thinking about it, but it's a lot more than they think it is. So those who are using and touching their policies are very satisfied. Those who aren't are a little bit concerned about whether or not they're really getting anything for their money. And those non-owners have at least considered it, but again, the value prop. So that's sort of those are sort of the key takeaways. So how can pet insurance providers and carriers and partners translate that into potential increased uptake of pet insurance or, partnership opportunities? So communicating that true cost of pet ownership. Shining a light on how different their perception is versus the reality, and without being too salesy, and maybe associations, organizations would add some credibility to that data, but just sort of, shining a light on that. and providing some, transparency, really clear explanations, educational resources and tools, a lot of covered, not covered. Again, we hear that a lot in the insurance space. Tell me very honestly what's covered, what's not covered, so that I can make that determination. And then that builds trust, because I feel the company's been open with me and I can make my decision, in an honest way. So value prop. So some things that might make a difference would be giving them something they can touch and feel, that makes them feel like they're getting something for their, $30 a month, whatever it is. So maybe it's partnership discounts. We've seen this before in the insurance space, across all insurance, discounts on, pet food or grooming or boarding, or potentially if there is a well visit option, and obviously there's a cost that goes into that, but that would give them a chance to touch it a little bit more. And then, find those Jeffs out there and the testimonials, maybe, advertising communications campaigns that raise awareness, that help pet owners share with other pet owners the successes and the reasons, and that moral obligation that pet owners have to take care of their pets. And kind of along with the discounts, some partnership opportunities might be valuable when a pet owner is new and they're acquiring their pet. They're acquiring all sorts of stuff. We heard from one respondent in our Qualitative that their breeder gave them a folder of information, and pet insurance stuff was in there, but they didn't see it, or didn't necessarily spend a lot of time with it. But that is the right time. And that participant told us that they were very open to messaging at that point from the breeder. So whether it's the Humane Society, the adoption agency, but at that initial point of acquisition is when they're sort of intaking all that information during training of new puppies. So again, the vet can come in here, that partnership where the vet, if they were able to buy it through their vet, or if their vet could give them advice, they would take it. And then retailers, they use PetSmart, they use Petco, they use Chewy. So discounts on products and services, or maybe partnerships with those retailers would be valuable. So final note here, which is, direct channels, employer channels. So as we mentioned earlier, a lot of folks were open to purchasing through their P&C insurance carrier or through their employer. They did want choices, so that the only caveat here is they want to be able to compare a couple different plans. So they'd be willing to purchase through an employer for a new pet. If they already had it, they might, they have some concerns about switching. So for some folks who were kind of on the fence about getting it, having one option is better than no options. But those folks who are already kind of in the market and looking, they don't necessarily want to choose between the employer's option and nothing. And then, is this portable? If you leave that job, can you take your pet insurance with you? So that's the lay of the land on pets and pet insurance.